We're going back to Ohio. It's late 1905. The Wright brothers.
Hmm.
If you were a journalist or even just a reader back then, you'd be totally forgiven for thinking the Wright brothers had, I don't know, failed or given up.
Or that they were just these charming eccentrics who had one lucky hop in 1903.
Right, at Kitty Hawk. Because after that initial success, just nothing. Crickets. No victory laps, no exhibitions, no big press conferences. The world knew about the idea of flight, but the brothers themselves, they went completely dark.
And that's the key part. The silence wasn't because of failure, which is, usually why people go quiet. It was the absolute opposite.
What was actually happening?
By late 1905, in this quiet field near Dayton, Ohio, they had achieved something. I mean, world-changing. Repeated, controlled, sustained flight with their machine, the Flyer of the Three.
So not just a little hop.
No, no. The sources highlight flights lasting over 30 minutes. They were banking, turning, flying in circles, and reliably returning to their starting point. They had solved the hardest part of the problem.
Which wasn't just getting off the ground.
It was controlling the machine in 3 dimensions.
So they'd cracked the code, the fundamental mechanical and aerodynamic code. They'd gone from a short leap to practical aviation. In today's world, that moment would trigger 1,000 tweets, a bidding war with VCs.
Never. Instantly.
But the Wrights did the opposite. They pulled the curtain down.
Mm-hmm.
So why? Why go dark right after hitting the most valuable milestone?
Well, the historical accounts, especially ones from the Henry Ford Museum, they make it crystal clear. The silence was entirely strategic.
A business decision.
Critical one. They understood that demonstrating a half-patented, half-finished technology was a massive liability. There were dozens of ambitious inventors, state-sponsored competitors all over Europe and America.
People like Alberto Santos Dumont.
And, most famously, Samuel Langley.
Ah, Langley. He's the perfect counterexample here, isn't he?
He really is. The Langley example is crucial context. He was backed by $50,000 in U.S. War Department funds.
A fortune at the time.
A huge fortune. And he was entirely public about his ambitions. He courted the press, he got government attention, he operated under this intense scrutiny.
And the result?
When his great aerodrome just spectacularly collapsed into the Potomac River.
Right.
On December 8th, 1903, the failure was instant and it was global. It was amplified everywhere. And the public nature of his attempt, it just taxed his credibility, demoralized his team, and it left him no quiet space to iterate.
So Langley's failure showed the cost of talking too soon, of inviting all that scrutiny while you're still in the middle of the build.
Exactly. And the Wrights, seeing this, chose the complete opposite path. They were worried competitors would steal their unpatented, hard-won designs just by watching a few public demonstrations.
So they refused to feed the rumor mill.
They refused to feed it with actionable intelligence. They literally chose to let doubt spread about their abilities. They even suffered accusations that their earlier successes were hoaxes, all rather than expose the actual functioning work while it was still fragile and, indefensible. They chose evidence of her explanation, even if it meant absorbing years of public skepticism.
That is the absolute essence of what we're calling the Wright rule.
Right.
Protect the core IP until it is defensible.
Right. They knew that rivals steal ideas, skeptics shape the narrative, and noise just grows way faster than evidence. So they kept building while the world was questioning if they'd build anything at all.
And that delay, that strategic delay, it paid off spectacularly. This leads to what sources called the hinge moment in 1908.
They had maintained this rigorous anti-theft window for nearly 3 years, quietly securing patents, perfecting their sales strategy.
So tell us about Wilbur arriving in Europe. It sounds like a geopolitical mic drop.
It really was. In August 1908, Wilbur shows up in France to begin demonstration flights near Le Mans. Now, the European aviation world was buzzing, very active, but nobody could match the control and the duration the Wrights had achieved in secret.
And what was the reaction?
The historical descriptions from the Library of Congress detail how Wilbur's first flights, especially his ability to do controlled circles and figure eights, were just mesmerizing.
They'd never seen anything like it.
Nothing. French reporters, who had been highly skeptical, they went from total disbelief to awe. Literally overnight.
It was an instant credibility flip. They didn't have to argue or campaign for their legitimacy.
No, the proof was so undeniable that it instantly established them as being decades ahead of their closest competitors.
The proof did all the talking. No motivational speeches, no branding, just a machine in the air and a world that was forced to update its beliefs instantly and globally.
And that's the Wright rule in action. You don't go public until you can demonstrate the thing end to end. Until the work is documented, saved, versioned, You are just providing free intelligence to your competition.
I think that's such an important distinction for everyone listening. Defensible means documented and finished, not just started. Okay, let's jump forward from the invention of flight to the invention of the modern smartphone. Because Apple ran a strikingly similar playbook, just, adapted for the corporate world. So let's fast forward a century. Cupertino, California. It's 2004. Steve Jobs is watching the rise of mobile phones, and he is, by all accounts, just deeply frustrated.
Right. By these clunky, frustrating devices that were totally controlled by the carriers.
He realized the partnership wasn't going to work. It wouldn't produce the seamless device he had in his head. So just like the Wrights, he decreed the project had to go completely inward.
And this required a phenomenal amount of operational discipline. The stakes were enormous. This wasn't just a new product.
It was a pivot for the whole company.
The entire company. The project was codenamed Project Purple, and Apple created a physical environment to enforce this secrecy. A lockdown area on campus that the staff started calling the Purple Dorm.
The stories about working there, they sound like it was an engineering monastery or something.
Oh, they enforced secrecy with almost military precision. Scott Forstall, who led the software development, he confirmed the famous rule. They literally put up a Fight Club sign.
No way.
The first rule of Project Purple was you don't talk about Project Purple. And this wasn't a suggestion, it was enforced. People were fired for leaks.
Okay, but I have to push back a little here. This level of secrecy sounds incredibly intense, maybe even counterproductive. Apple had patents, they had a huge legal team. Why do they need such extreme walls?
Right.
For a modern startup that needs seed funding and market testing, wouldn't absolute silence be more dangerous than, controlled buzz?
That's a great question, and it really gets to the core difference between, say, internal and external threats. For Apple, it wasn't just about protecting the design of the phone.
But was it then?
It was about protecting the incredibly complex and, at the time, fragile multi-touch user interface.
Wow, the software magic.
The magic. If competing operating systems had seen early mock-ups of pinching, swiping, scrolling, they could have rushed their own versions to market. It would have forced Apple to compete against an established, even if clunky, field. The silence protected the core user experience. That was their differentiator.
So silence preserved the magic until the moment of maximum impact.
And it preserved the internal focus. The sources note that the secrecy went all the way home. Engineers told their families they were working on the next Mac, a minor peripheral.
Which means they avoided not only the external press, but also the dilution of focus that comes from well-meaning external opinions.
Exactly. They weren't under any pressure from analysts or the stock market to release something too early. It allowed them to endure years of really demanding work.
The cost was high. Forstall warned recruits it would be years of nights and weekends. But because the project was silent, the reward mechanism was kept on the right side of the timeline.
Right. After the work was finished, the internal reward of solving an impossible problem was the motivation, not the external praise of having a cool job.
Absolutely. The result was that legendary reveal on January 9, 2007 at Macworld. Jobs introduced the product not as a collection of features, but as a finished reality.
3 devices in one. A phone, a widescreen iPod, and an internet communicator.
The world met the iPhone as a finished fact. The magic wasn't just the tech. It was the discipline of keeping the talk inside until the product could introduce itself.
And the consensus was immediate.
Yeah.
This was the future.
The key insight there is so simple. Silence preserves focus internally, and it prevents the distraction of half-formed narratives externally. By avoiding that attention tax, Project Purple had total control over its timeline and its ultimate story.
The result wasn't just a product launch. It was a world event that reset expectations for an entire industry.
Which makes perfect sense when you're dealing with external competitors. But this brings us perfectly to the second, and I'd argue more insidious, threat. Because most of us don't have competitors trying to steal our designs.
Yep.
We have our own brains trying to steal our motivation. We need to explore the psychological trap we set for ourselves when we crave that early applause. Most people, when they leak their future goals, a new routine, writing a book, starting a business, they do it because they feel like they need that external encouragement.
They want the pat on the back.
Exactly. But the sources we looked at suggest that encouragement is often the wrong kind of fuel. Sometimes it's actively corrosive.
It's the moment the announcement is rewarded instead of the execution. When you go public with an identity-related intention, you get a social payout right away.
Applause. Recognition.
Validation, and a feeling of being a person who does that thing. And
Yeah.
that immediate social reward, it just short circuits the long, often painful process of actually earning the identity.
And this isn't just a theory, right? There's actual research on this.
Oh, yeah. This backfiring mechanism is strongly supported by psychological research, most notably the work by Peter Gollwitzer and his colleagues.
Published where?
In journals like the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology, under titles like When Intentions Go Public.
Okay, so let's dive into that research. What did Gollwitzer's team actually discover about how talking about a goal weakens our ability to achieve it?
They identified a very specific psychological mechanism. When a person announces a goal, especially an identity-related one like, I'm becoming a writer or I'm getting serious about fitness,
Mm-hmm.
and that announcement is met with social acknowledgement, the brain mistakes the social recognition for actual progress.
So you get the dopamine hit of the writer credit without ever having to face the blank page. You feel like you've already made an identity shift just by declaring it.
Exactly. The researchers found that social recognition creates a premature sense of possessing the aspired-to identity. In your brain's calculus, the gap between who you are and who you want to be, that internal tension that drives hard work, it's already been partially closed by someone else's acknowledgement.
And that tension is so crucial. It's that uncomfortable feeling of, I'm not yet that person, that forces you to act. If the world validates you as that person right away, the tension just, it dissipates.
That is the key psychological backfire. They ran multiple studies on this. In one classic experiment, they gave participants an identity goal to become a jurist, which is a very specialized legal identity.
Okay.
Half the students were asked to publicly declare this intention, the other half kept it private. Then they were given free time to work on tasks related to their goal.
And what was the outcome in terms of actual effort?
The results were stark. Those who publicly declared their intention spent significantly less time doing the actual hard work reading case law, studying compared to the group that kept it private.
Less time, but how do they feel?
That's the craziest part. When asked about their progress, the publicly validated group reported a stronger sense of being closer to the goal despite putting in less effort.
Wow.
They had received the reward immediately, so it reduced their internal need to follow through on the difficult, often lonely actual work.
This research just completely reframes the whole idea of accountability. We think going public creates it, but instead it offers premature closure. It lets you cash out the emotional reward before you've even minted the currency.
And that's why we say talk is cheap, but it's not free. It costs focus, it invites opinions, it turns genuine internal growth into a performance for an audience.
So if you want to sustain momentum, you have to build a system that rewards the action, not the announcement.
Exactly. That deep, quiet satisfaction you get from checking off a private, hard task, that's a much purer, cleaner fuel than the external hit from 50 likes on a post about the task. You have to force the brain to earn its validation.
But this is so hard because modern social platforms are built to monetize the pre-announcement. They reward the vulnerability of the intention. So knowing this is the default, how do we operationalize silence and protect our own motivation?
We can leverage the same principles used by the rights in Apple and just apply them to personal discipline. We have to create firewalls between our ambition and the public.
Okay, so the first step has to be replacing the public narrative with private, undeniable data.
Absolutely. The first tool is to replace updates with evidence. Stop posting progress photos or I'm grinding updates.
And
Instead, track measurable facts privately. Use a spreadsheet, a journal, a notes app. Log the specifics. Hours spent, reps completed, pages written. Evidence beats explanation every single time, and critically, it keeps the reward internal.
the satisfaction of seeing the numbers go up privately.
Reinforces the behavior better than any external praise.
Okay, but here's the hard part. People in our lives, friends, family, colleagues, they're going to ask what we're up to, especially if we've kind of retreated to work on something. You can't just be rude.
No, you need a professional, non-committal silence script. The sources suggest having one polite, neutral sentence ready to go.
Give me an example.
Try this. I'm working on something that needs my full focus right now. I'll share the finished product when it's ready.
That's powerful. It's firm, it's polite, and it's totally non-committal. It stops the conversation without you having to lie or over-explain.
And that script immediately lets you use the third tool. Shrink the disclosure circle. You have to separate the world into two tiers.
Tier 1.
Tier 1 is collaborators, the absolute minimum number of people who must know the details to keep the project moving. Your editor, your co-founder, your direct supervisor,
And Tier 2 is?
everyone else. And they only get the results later. You establish a strict need-to-know list, and you stick to it ruthlessly.
This isn't a social preference, it's a tactical necessity. If someone isn't helping you build the thing, they don't get updates.
And this is especially true for the emotional side of the work. Hard work generates struggle, frustration, self-doubt, the urge to quit. Most people process these feelings publicly to get sympathy or a quick motivation boost.
So we need to institute private processing. The internal story, the anxiety, the self-doubt, the moments you want to tear it all down, that stays inside the workroom.
Process privately. Journaling, therapy, or with one single trusted person who is there to listen, not to broadcast. Don't turn the struggle into public content.
Why not?
If you get sympathy for the pain you're going through, you feel emotionally compensated for the suffering. And that reduces the internal pressure to actually push through to the other side. Performance of struggle kills momentum.
That is the ultimate test. If you can protect the integrity of the struggle and keep those hard conversations private, you protect the work itself. Now let's pivot. From personal discipline and small teams to world-changing events where silence wasn't just helpful, it was the necessary difference between victory and catastrophe. This next section takes the principles of the Right Rule and Project Purple and applies them to the highest possible stakes. Military strategy.
Yeah.
This is where we see how disciplined silence can maximize explosive impact and control perception on a global scale.
The stakes don't get any higher.
The setup is late spring 1944. The truth is fixed. The Allies are going to invade occupied France at Normandy. But the operation needed what Winston Churchill famously called a bodyguard of lies.
The D-Day landings were so logistically complex that total surprise was, almost impossible. Success hinged not just on getting forces onto the beach, but on preventing the Germans from committing their massive armored reserves, especially the ones near Paris, right after the landings.
They had to make them hesitate.
They had to convince Hitler that Normandy was just a diversion and the real assault was still coming somewhere else.
And the centerpiece of this massive deception was Operation Fortitude. The Allies created an entire phantom army.
The first U.S. Army Group, or FUSAG, and they based it in southeast Britain, right across the narrowest part of the English Channel, aimed directly at Pas-de-Calais.
The complexity of maintaining this lie. Absolute silence on the Normandy plan and overwhelming noise on the fake plan. It's just staggering.
They used every technique available. Physical deception on the ground, inflatable tanks, rubber and canvas trucks, all positioned in staging areas to look convincing from German reconnaissance planes.
And dummy landing craft.
Thousands of them in ports facing Pas-de-Calais.
But the really hard part wasn't the physical decoys. It was maintaining the deception over the airwaves. Radio silence on the real plans was critical, but they also had to generate convincing fake radio traffic for FUSAG.
And this is where the discipline was just essential. They had dedicated, highly skilled radio operators, trained to mimic the specific cadence, the chatter, the command structures of General Patton's fictional 1.5 million man army group.
So they were creating a ghost army out of thin airwaves.
The sheer volume of transmissions they generated was designed to overwhelm German intelligence listeners and make FUSAG's presence seem like an undeniable reality. The silence of the genuine Normandy command was covered by the calculated noise of the fictional one.
But the absolute linchpin of the whole operation, the real genius, was a double agent who fed the narrative directly to the Germans. Agent Garbo.
Juan Pujol Garcia, a Spanish double agent whose credibility with the Germans was immaculate. He ran an entirely fictitious network of 27 agents across Britain.
All fake.
All of them fake, created through tireless correspondence, fake expense reports, and highly detailed fabricated intelligence reports. The Germans trusted him completely.
And his role after the initial landings on June 6th proved the value of keeping the truth silent.
Yes. On June 9th, 1944, 3 days after the beachhead was secured, Garbo sent what MI5 called his most important message of all. It was detailed, urgent, and insisted that while the Normandy landings were strong, they were undoubtedly a diversionary blow.
To pull reserves away from the real target.
Exactly. He swore that Patton's main force, FUSAG, had not yet moved from southeast England and was just waiting for the signal to strike Pas-de-Calais.
And because the genuine Normandy plans had been kept in total silence, the Germans had no contradictory intelligence they could trust.
None. Hitler held the armored reserves back for 2 critical weeks, waiting for the real attack that never came.
And that bought the Allies the time they needed.
It bought them the time to consolidate the beachhead and secure the logistics to win the war in the West. If the actual D-Day plan, any detail of it, had become a public conversation, the entire operation would have been compromised.
Countless lives lost.
Silence here wasn't just strategic. It was tactical necessity that saved the entire effort.
It's the ultimate proof that noise is vulnerability.
Yeah.
They commanded attention through controlled completion, not anticipation.
Mm.
Which brings us to a surprisingly parallel modern strategy, but in the world of high-impact entertainment. Let's talk about the Beyoncé method.
Okay.
So, in the modern music industry, the standard playbook is this heavily scaffolded, months-long rollout.
Oh, yeah. You have the album title announcement,
The first single drops.
promotional interviews, the social media countdown, pre-order incentives.
It's all designed to mitigate risk by generating hype and anticipation. Leaks are the constant fear.
And in early December 2013, Beyoncé did something that was considered absolute heresy in that industry. For over a year, she and her small circle had been recording and filming in total secrecy. A 14-song, 17-video visual album.
And the internal code of silence was absolute.
Totally protected the integrity of the project from start to finish.
So there was no countdown, no singles, no interviews, no hype scaffolding at all. The public, the media, they had zero awareness the album was even finished, let alone ready to be released.
The work sessions were on an artistic timeline, not a marketing one. The commitment was to release it when it's ready, not when the promotional cycle said so, and this requires immense discipline.
Because the fear is that if you don't advertise, the album just sinks.
It sinks without a trace.
And then, on Friday, December 13, 2013, the self-titled album just appeared on iTunes, delivered as a finished, complex body of work. No explanation, just the product.
The reversal of power was immediate and total. Instead of pleading for attention through months of press, the finished work commanded it.
It hijacked the news cycle.
Instantly. The world didn't get a promise, it got proof. A massive, undeniable fact that demanded consumption.
And the results just shattered industry expectations. Standard logic said a surprise release with no build-up would fail commercially. It didn't.
It sold 80,000 copies in the US in 3 hours.
Just 3 hours.
And then, just 3 days later, Apple announced it was the fastest-selling album ever on iTunes worldwide at the time. Over 800,000 copies in 3 days. #1 in 104 countries.
That's insane.
The silence of the build phase ensured the maximum explosive impact of the release.
This proves the point so clearly. The loudest thing you can possibly do is ship, not announce the shipment. When you talk about something coming, the world decides if they care. When you deliver something finished and undeniable, the world is forced to react to a fact.
It shifts the dynamic entirely. Silence protects you from the noise of anticipation, and it allows the finished product to be experienced cleanly without the filter of pre-existing narratives or cynical critique. And this principle holds true whether you're launching an invasion, a smartphone, or a career-defining piece of art.
That is a powerful principle, and it allows us to transition to our final section, which is about why this disciplined silence isn't just strategic for your professional output, but absolutely essential for personal integrity, for protecting the value of our most private resources.
The ultimate goal of building quietly is to protect the intrinsic value of the thing itself, whether it's a product, a donation, or a relationship, from the corruption that comes with seeking external credit.
Okay, let's go to Nashville, 1966. Dolly Parton is winning her first major songwriter award. She's clearly on the path to becoming a global megastar, and she takes her husband, Carl Dean, to the ceremony, a huge public milestone.
But the crucial moment wasn't at the ceremony, it was on the drive home. Carl Dean makes this clear, definitive declaration of terms to his wife.
What did he say?
He said he was proud of her, but he was absolutely not interested in being part of the show. He said he didn't want to go to another one of them dang things again.
And Dolly, in this profound act of relational intelligence, she didn't take it as a rejection of her career.
No, she saw it as a healthy declaration of a boundary. She listened. And she created this firm boundary where the world got Dolly Parton the star and Carl got Dolly the person.
And she kept their relationship rigorously private for over 50 years.
Minimal appearances, almost no public comments on their marriage, and certainly no constant parade of public proof that they were happy. This protected their private life from turning into content, which is the default for modern life.
Dolly said she didn't want what they had to get jumbled up with the other, meaning the noise and spectacle of her fame. It's a strategic move to protect intimacy from being diluted by public performance.
And this strategy, it speaks to a broader psychological truth about intimacy and public broadcasting. Modern life gives everyone a stage, and we're constantly tempted to turn our deepest relationships into broadcasts for validation.
What does the research say about the corrosive effect of oversharing relationships online?
The findings are pretty sharp. Research from the University of Kansas found that partners often report a strong dislike when their significant other broadcasts their innermost feelings online.
Why is that?
The underlying reason is that when private information is shared with everyone, the partner who was the original confidant can feel less special and unique.
You dilute the intimacy when you democratize the vulnerability. The specialness of a shared secret just evaporates when it becomes a commodity for public consumption.
That's the dilution effect. And furthermore, research on couples' social media behavior found that while displaying the relationship publicly in general terms correlated with satisfaction, excessive public displays correlated negatively with satisfaction.
So it's a warning sign.
In many cases, hyperpublic affection can signal overcompensation. You're posting affection more intensely than you're living it. It acts like a dashboard warning light for deeper issues.
So Dolly's quiet consistency wasn't just a charming quirk. It was a highly practical, strategic defense of her most important relationship.
Yeah, it ensured their joy wasn't constantly polluted by the need to prove it to a crowd.
Now let's look at the ultimate example of protecting integrity. That's philanthropy. Chuck Feeney, the co-founder of Duty Free Shoppers, is known as the invisible billionaire. This man, who passed away recently, gave away over $8 billion and spent decades keeping his identity as the donor a complete secret.
The discipline of that is it's alien to the modern ego. His foundation, the Atlantic Philanthropies, was structured specifically to protect his anonymity. It didn't even have his name on it.
He was determined to avoid what we've been calling the attention tax.
Right. The cost of managing fame, ego, and public expectations that comes with visible wealth.
The specifics of his secrecy are incredible. The sources detail how intensely he guarded his privacy. He flew economy, wore a cheap watch, lived in rental apartments.
Get this. At events for the foundation, if a photographer was there, he'd often bring his own photographer who would pretend to take pictures with no film in the camera, just to make sure no unauthorized images of him as the donor ever surfaced.
That's a whole other level.
His motivation was pure and strategically sound. He wanted to walk unrecognized, keep his family safe, and ensure the foundation wasn't just a monument to his ego. And most critically, he wanted the money to go to work quickly.
If he'd attached his name to every donation,
The money would have been delayed by the fame, the bureaucracy, the PR demands. He was optimizing for impact, not for credit.
but the secret was eventually threatened by a business dispute that required public arbitration. And this is where he had to choose between controlled disclosure and accidental exposure.
Right. In 1997, he saw the threat and decided to reveal his identity to the New York Times. It led to that landmark headline, "He gave away $600 million and no one knew."
So the reveal wasn't a victory lap.
Not at all. It was triggered by litigation that was going to rip away his privacy anyway. By revealing it on his terms, he was controlling the truth, not seeking applause.
His life is the ultimate contrast to the modern mindset, where generosity is instantly broadcast. But there's a crucial psychological reason why silent giving is better for the donor's character, too.
And this connects directly back to our earlier psychological research, the danger of moral self-licensing.
Okay, define that for us.
Researchers like Merritt, Efron, and Monin define it as the subconscious mechanism where receiving public credit for a good deed or announcing a difficult discipline subconsciously banks moral credibility.
How does that credit bank then undermine you later?
Once you get that public validation, your brain feels freed or licensed to behave in less disciplined ways later because you feel like you've already paid your moral dues.
Give me an example.
If you publicly announce you're starting a strict diet, the praise you get, "Wow, that's great, good for you," provides that moral license. It makes it psychologically easier for you to rationalize ordering dessert later that week because you've already gotten the reward for the initial intention.
So Feeney's absolute refusal to take credit ensured he couldn't cash out that moral credibility early. The only reward was the internal satisfaction of seeing the money do its work.
Precisely. He ran the absolute opposite system of the Gallwitzer research subjects. He refused to cash the reward of recognition, ensuring the integrity of his focus and his commitment remained intact to the very end. He kept the motivation pure, focused entirely on the outcome, not the recognition.
This entire deep dive, from the rights protecting the flyer the third to the deep deception of Operation Fortitude, to Chuck Feeney protecting the integrity of his giving it all, leads to one irrefutable conclusion.
The synthesis of the lesson is, it's undeniable. The greatest achievements controlled flight, the deception that won the day on D-Day, massive philanthropy, enduring relationships, they all share one key ingredient.
That is,
A commitment to building in peace and letting the results make the necessary noise.
it requires a core, and I think a very difficult, mindset shift. You have to stop optimizing your life for being seen and start optimizing for being effective. You have to treat the announcement not as a prerequisite for success, but as the final seal on a completed piece of work. Refuse to cash that reward of recognition early.
When you talk too soon, you don't just lose focus. You sacrifice the element of surprise, you invite external governance opinions, doubts, critics, and you bleed off that crucial internal hunger and tension that you need to push through the hardest part of the build. Protect the tension. Protect the work.
So we have 3 micro steps we want to challenge you, the listener, to try immediately. Applying these principles, this is how you start building in peace.
Okay.
First, pick one goal you've been talking about and define the measurable proof for it. Don't define the effort, define the delivery. Write it down in a notebook privately. My next proof is finishing 5,000 words, or my next proof is 10 logged continuous training sessions.
Second, start a quiet streak. Aim for, say, 7 or 10 days of absolute silence. No public mentions, no hints, no soft launches on social media. Only private tracking check marks in a notebook, hours logged, pages finished. And just observe how your internal motivation changes when the only audience is you.
And third, define a shipping threshold. You announce only at the point where you deliver a finished, measurable piece of work. Not when you start, not halfway through, but when it is done, documented, and ready. Be like Beyoncé. Let the world meet the finished fact.
If you can maintain that silence, you protect the maximum potential of the achievement. You will find out very quickly, and maybe uncomfortably, how real your intentions truly are when the applause has been muted.
If it's real, it will survive silence. So build it in peace.